Welcome to The Craft. I'm your host, May Globus. This podcast is a collection of intimate conversations on artistry, mastery, and life with talented, passionately curious creatives and entrepreneurs. Most are dear friends, some are those I've admired from afar. I hope you enjoy these conversations, this exploration of the humanity that connects all of us, as much as I do having them. Thank you for being here and for listening. Maurice Li is one of the most followed creatives on Instagram, with a soul and eye unlike any other. He's also co-founder and creative services director for Stay and Wander, a powerhouse content studio and creator network. Maurice grew up in a home with parents who encouraged him to follow his own path, one that found him in venture capitalism, with photography as a side hobby. He left the VC world to pursue his passion full-time before starting Stay and Wander with co-founder Alex Strohl. The studio has worked across automotive, travel, food and beverage, and gear and technology, with clients such as Lexus, Marriott International, Nespresso, Google, and the North Face. In this layered discussion, we explore where he got his passion for photography, his beautiful relationship with his parents, his insights on the landscape of content creation and platforms moving forward, and more. Please enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with the incredibly wise Maurice Li. Maurice Li, welcome to The Craft.
Hello, May. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
I'm so honored to be invited.
I'm so happy you're here.
I'm happy to be here.
So I was thinking about when we first met, and it was way back in the day, vancouverisawesome.com.
Long time ago.
Long time ago. You were the events editor.
I was.
And
briefly.
I was, yes. And I was the editor for a series on there called Building Blocks. And I think that is initially where we first met, and then crossed over at various events after that and became pretty fast friends. We both like food and eating, so that was some mega bonding.
Yeah, and music.
And music.
Yes,
live shows.
And I think we quickly realized like how many mutual friends we had. So it was a
Correct.
very organic friendship the way it developed.
Yeah.
Because we never actually worked together or did any, thing for the publication together.
No, we didn't. I'm actually, now that you're bringing up the music part, do you remember the last live show we went to together?
Was it Shy Girls?
Yes, it was at the Media Club. That was a while ago. I can't wait for live shows.
Oh, no, that's not true. You know where we went?
Where?
Bon Iver.
Right. Yes.
A couple times.
A couple of times.
So, yeah.
Oh, I can't wait, Momo, for the next time we can do this.
Soon, hopefully.
Soon, hopefully. So I want to take it way back with you. What was it like growing up? What was your family like? I know your dad worked for Air Canada. He was an avionics technician.
Yes, he was. My dad, it was a very interesting upbringing. My dad and my mom both worked very, very hard. They both had careers of their own. My dad actually worked night shifts. So he would sort of work 12-hour shifts in the evenings working for the airline. And then he would also work doing construction by day. So, I didn't really see my dad very much. He also didn't sleep very much. And I know this because I still got to see him, enough to bombard him with questions whenever I could. I was a very curious child. So yeah, there was that. And then my mom also, at the time she was working in banking. When I was very young, she was busy, 9 to 5 type thing, but commuting downtown. We used to live in the burbs. So yeah, she was, often also away from the home. So me and my sister, we learned to be quite independent in terms of cooking and things like that. For a while, my great grandma lived with us, and she was, very, very OG, very old school in her ways. So that had a, part to play in terms of my upbringing as well.
Were you close to her?
I was not as close as my sister, but I was close to her as well. I think, when I look back, it was like I thought I had a super normal upbringing. But as I got older, I realized that it was not that normal in a lot of ways, just in the way that we functioned. But it had so much to do with, I guess, how I've ended up. I don't really regret much of it
Hmm.
at all. I think that, my parents worked really hard to be able to provide for us. And, you know, more than that, they always gave me the freedom to make my own choices. And so that was, always conveyed to me from a very young age. So, yeah, it's kind of allowed me to pursue, um, you know, lots of different things, ideas, just what I want to do, what kind of person I want to be.
Hmm.
That's always been, my freedom to choose. So,
That's really incredible, actually. And I love hearing that because it's not something that you hear often from someone who grew up in an Asian household. The freedom to pursue what you want to do. Often there is, you know, what what your family hopes you'll do.
absolutely.
Hmm.
I mean, through the years, we've had conversations about that because, I mean, now that we're older, sometimes my parents will sort of rib me a bit or make fun of me and say things like, I wish I was more of a tiger mom, or we were more tiger parents. And for those who don't know, that's the book that was written some years ago about very, very strict parents in the Asian culture that dictate almost every step of your life, both professionally, socially, and all that. So my parents were the opposite of that.
Hmm.
From a very, very young age, they were like, yeah, we'd love it if you became X, doctor, lawyer, but if you want to become an artist, do it. Just, put your heart into it, work hard, do those things.
Hmm.
You hear stories about like people, Asian families that want their kids to marry to the same culture. Nope, don't have any pressure like that. It's like marry who you want. Like if you love
Hmm.
somebody, marry them. Even the idea of marriage, right? Things like that are very, very strong values for
Hmm.
a lot of Asian households. From a very young age, it's like marriage is great, but if you don't want to get married, stay single for as long as you can, and figure out what you want. And if you never get married or don't have kids, that's cool by us, right? It's so,
Hmm.
as I got older, I became it became easier and easier to recognize the amount of freedom that I had. And, I'll always be grateful for that. I think it's just allowed me to form my own opinions about a lot of things, make my own choices, and really just sort of carve my own path in life. And I feel like even amongst close friends of mine, you know, a lot of them never got that chance as they were growing up, or never didn't have the good fortune of having that type of relationship with my
Hmm.
parents. I mean, it's not all great. I think that in some ways I probably could have used a little more lockdown, guidance to push me to accomplish things at a younger age. But I mean, again, I personally don't regret how things have turned out. So
No, I mean, we'll get into it,
yeah,
but what you've done in your career is really amazing, and
thank you.
we will get into that. Um, I also know that your dad loved photography when you were younger, and it's something that you observed and sort of influenced you in what you do now.
It's true, and it's funny because sometimes I think to myself, my parents aren't really creative. So how did I ever, become a creative? And then I go deeper back into my memories and it's like, oh no, no, wait a minute. I mean, the reason why I ever picked up a camera was because my dad, was into photography. And, it was interesting because he had the gear. I remember this box that was locked and I would always want to get into it. And eventually one day, I guess when I was old enough and he allowed me to get into it, it was, there was a camera body in there. There were, other pieces of photographic equipment. And, we got to walk through and look at some of those pieces. I had the chance to ask lots of questions about what they did. And, one of the, I guess, unfortunate things is because of how hard my dad worked and how much time he put into, I guess, just making money to support the family, he never really had time to enjoy that hobby, especially by the time I was old enough to appreciate what he was doing. So
Hmm.
the overlap, if you will, in time between when he was, pursuing his photography hobby and when I picked it up was very, very small. I mean, I can only remember a very small handful of times, when my dad was actually taking photos and I was observing him doing it doing it and asking questions about it. By the
Mm-hmm.
time I really got interested in photography, it was something that he had, for all intents and purposes, put away, and that box stayed locked. So, I look back on that with a bit of regret because I know that, it was something that he probably had to give up for me. So in some ways, I guess, me developing as a photographer eventually in later life is a ode directly to the sacrifices that he made, if you will.
Mm. Would you ever ask him, now to, maybe pick up a camera with you and go shoot?
I mean, it's been so long that my dad himself doesn't even own a camera,
Ah.
but I know that he still asks me about my photography when we look at photographs, on rare occasions where we just see images. I mean, I know the eye is still there because he'll talk about things, elements of photos and composition and things like that. And I mean, composition is the biggest thing for me when it comes to photography, and I'm quite certain that I got that from him.
Hmm. Your dad, is sounds like someone who's very, maybe good with his hands, with the avionics and the picking up the camera. And I don't know if you remember, but like a number of years ago, he helped me change my car
Yes.
battery.
Yeah. My dad is, he's pretty interesting for two big reasons. One is that he is basically the complete opposite of me. So, I'm kind of like a soft skills, computer technology kind of person. He is, blue collar. He can build a house with his bare hands and has, for friends of mine, like it sounds like an exaggeration, but everything from like the foundation to putting in a toilet, in a house, these are the kinds of things that he does. And he's kind of self-taught. Like, so he's a plumber, he's an electrician, and he does all this kind of crazy work by day. And then, when I was younger, like I said, when I was growing up, by night, he would go and work on, electrical systems on airplanes. So it's kind of like, it's almost funny to recount. It's like people ask me jokingly, they'll say, "How could you ever live up to that?" And, for me, it's like, hey, you know what? I just stopped. Like, I never even tried because I just can't, right? Like, I mean, it's a completely different skill set. He's brilliant in a completely different way from most people that I know.
Hmm.
And so I just sit back like everybody else and appreciate. Like you were saying, he helped you for something. Like I've got countless friends who know my dad because he helped them make, fix, or do something that they had no idea how to do.
Hmm.
And I mean that extends through to my daily life now. I mean he's older and he's not as capable. He can't whatever it is, carry a fridge up 3 flights of stairs by himself, like I've seen him do on many occasions. And he's not going to, build anybody a house anymore. But there are lots of things that come up, in daily
Hmm.
life that I have no idea where to begin. Most people would probably need to Google or watch a YouTube video. And I'm just like, Dad, and my dad is funny because he's a bit of a private person. And so I won't see him. It's for weeks. Like, we're not one of these families where I see my parents every Sunday for dinner or something like that. Like I can go a month without seeing my dad just because he's got his own thing going on. He doesn't feel like it. And we talk by phone or text or WhatsApp or whatever it is. Right. But
Hmm.
the moment I need him to fix something or do something, like literally he'll show up in an hour. It's
Wow.
it's the craziest thing. Right. And
He loves doing it.
I think he loves doing it. And he has this, intense desire um, to help and also be needed, right? I mean, like
Mm.
it's one of those things where he feels very useful when that's happened. And I try to thank him, but there are basically no words that can express the gratitude that I have when he helps me do things like that.
Hmm.
So I try my best, but he's just like no, no, no. And he'll like, it's crazy, he'll like spend, I don't know, half a day like installing a dishwasher for me and something. And then when he walks out, he'll like try to put an envelope in my pocket saying like, "Oh, it's the pandemic and your business isn't doing well. So here's some
Mm.
money." And I'm like, I freak out, right? Because I'm like,
Mm.
how can I even begin to accept this money? And then so we have to fight and I have to like shove it back in his pocket and push him out the door when it's like, I owe you for these things that you do for me. And not just now, but all my life. Right. So, but
Mm.
anyway, that's just a brief portrait of the type of person that my dad is. He's a man of
Very,
few words, but lots of
but very,
actions.
very, yeah, generous in action
Yeah.
and generosity.
Hmm.
Hmm. It's really fascinating to listen to you talk about your parents. You're talking about your dad being a night owl, which I know you're a night owl as
Yes.
well. But also your mom being in banking and finance, and then knowing that you eventually got into venture capitalism. So
Well,
there's
so the funny thing is, I mean, she was doing that when I was very young, but
mm,
she has left that world behind for a long, long time. And eventually she left and opened a boutique. And so she was, dealing retail with fashion. And this may sound a bit familiar, but she would basically travel to Japan, 3 or 4 times a year on buying trips for her little boutique that was in Bentall Center downtown.
no
And
way.
so, from there, she ran that for a while and then became an esthetician and then opened a salon doing, skincare. And so that is ultimately, I think, when she found her calling. And to this day, she still works with skincare and things like that.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Your parents are very multi-talented, and they just seem like they just pick up things if they want to do it
Yeah,
and learn
they,
it.
I mean, they can do a lot. Very different people. But yeah, I mean, I'm in awe of them all the time.
Mm,
And also that, my mom has a very different personality from my dad, right? Everything that I said about my dad is probably the opposite with my mom. She's, super warm and loves to talk and, wants to hang out and, treats me like a friend and has
mm,
for many, many years.
mhm,
You know, her friends are younger than me most of the time and always have been. Like it's just like she hangs out with young people because she's so youthful, right? And
mm.
they enjoy her company because she's youthful, but she has wisdom. So
Right. And sounds like probably a lot of curiosity
yeah,
too.
she's
Mm,
fun.
that's great. Your parents sound amazing.
They're cool people.
They're
Yeah,
pretty cool
I like them.
parents.
I like them.
I can tell. And well, tell me about you and what you were like as a kid and into being a teenager and then young adults.
Okay. When I was quite young, I was basically a bookworm. The library was my world. It was my favorite place. I was super curious and inquisitive. And I mean, I don't know if I should admit this here, but I did things like steal encyclopedias because I just wanted to be able to read them more. And, having more than one was beyond the limit of what I could take out. So, yes, I will admit, and I repent for it now, but, I have done things like stolen encyclopedias and put them back later out of, my childhood, elementary school library. But I mean, yeah, I would just go through that decimal system and read books of all sorts. And then I guess what happened was eventually I discovered sports and then I discovered socializing. And excuse me, these two things were both also fascinating to me. Um, I think for a long, long time as a young child, um, I never really entertained the idea of like people. And then starting, I think in maybe grade 6 or grade 7, I suddenly became really like turned on to the idea of socializing and talking to people. And so from there, it kind of like the inquisitive side of me, I mean, it was still around, but it kind of took a back seat to, oh, hey, like let's be friends and developing like, social ties to people. And then also that came hand in hand with like playing sports. And I guess I was pretty good at basketball when I was that age. And so, yeah, it was interesting. I just, I think I became a well-rounded person, but not how some people do it, which is, all at once. I sort
Mm,
of developed one side of me and then was like, okay, well, I mean, that's there, but let me develop a whole different side of me. And so that's kind of how I developed as a person. I went from more of a very one-on-one person to like somebody who could function well in groups and things like that.
hmm
But to this day, I mean, I still think of myself as somebody that's quite introverted in a lot of ways. I think that if you were to ask people that know me well, they might recognize that. But people that know me more as acquaintances would be like, "What are you talking about?" Right? Like we see you out and about and sharing things on socials, and how can that be? Right? But
hmm
I mean, part of the whole advent of social media is what helped me develop that because I mean, if you really think about it, like we were talking about this before, but when you fact checked me, there's not really a lot that you can find
No.
because I don't actually really share a lot in a very, very open public way. And what I do share is very, very carefully selected by me to share. And the people that, know me well will know me because we've had one-on-one interactions, be it in person and out or long chats,
Hmm.
text over the phone. We've traveled together. Like that's the way to really know me. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I'm just more comfortable that way. Even though because of my work, because
Hmm.
of, the company that I run and what I do in terms of socials. And I mean, we might get into this a bit later, but what the function that I have at work in terms of connecting people, that's become like such a big part of my life. So
Mm. Well, I've known you for almost a decade, and if not
more than,
more,
yeah.
and you're a very, very observant individual, which doesn't surprise me given what you were saying about being younger and bookish and inquisitive, and you're probably quite an observer as a young child, and I wonder if that observant nature has also given you this ability to have such a wonderful eye with your photography.
I mean, I've never really connected the two like that, but I mean, I would say probably does. Um, I mean, fun fact, like the company that I run is called Stay and Wander. And part of where that name comes, like a lot of people think, oh, well, obviously the wander part is easy, but the stay part it's got to do with hotels or something because you guys are so active in travel. But actually the stay part comes from the idea of, some of my favorite photos that I've taken. I mean, it could mean me camping out, like literally standing in an intersection in Hong Kong by myself for 3 hours to get the shot that I want, like watching, life go by and figuring out just the right moment that I want to capture. And that applies, when I'm in the wilderness, when I'm in the mountains, wherever that is. And so it's, yeah, I mean, I guess now that you bring it up, that is a big part of it. I have a lot of patience to observe. And yeah, I mean, from photography to just like daily life, like I do, I don't think that it's correct to say that I pride myself on, but I do notice a lot of things, and they sort of go into my mental record, and I do what I will with them later.
Yeah.
But I think it's definitely a part of my personality to be observant.
Well, this brings back a memory for me. In 2018, we were in Japan together. We just happened to be there at the same time, and it
Yes,
was it
what
was
a fantastic
perfect.
coincidence.
It was a fantastic coincidence. It was my first time in Japan. You'd been there a number of times. Yeah, you were the perfect friend to go on this adventure with in Tokyo. And I remember you sent me a message, and there was somewhere that you were going to there. You wanted to take some photos, and I unfortunately couldn't join you. But I remember you were saying that you were sprinting ahead of the crowd
Yeah.
to get to this certain spot ahead of everyone, and you waited there for a long time until you got this gorgeous shot of this woman in, I don't know if it was turquoise or a cerulean blue um, dress, and she was amongst a, like flaming red foliage.
Yeah, so that was Hitachi Seaside Park. And yeah, it's pretty much as you described. Like I'd seen this place for a long time and I'd wanted to go there and take photos. And, as often happens, the reality is quite different from the photos that you see. So I show up and there's thousands of people waiting at the gate for this park to open. And I think it was 8 or 9 a.m. And I had taken a 2 hour train ride from Tokyo to get there. And so I was already super disheartened, right? I was like, oh gosh, like, I mean, it was a peak season for this plant that you're talking about. It's called the Kochia plant, and it turns different colors throughout the year. And at that time, yes, it's like this flaming red, and they have these fields that are just filled with them. And so that's exactly what happened. Like I was like, what are my options here? Like, so I had to wait in line. I mean, everybody's very orderly in Japan. So I was at the back of the line already. But as soon as that gate opened and I got in, I literally had, 30 pounds of gear on my back and I just sprinted. And I think it was, gosh, I don't even know, 2 or 3 kilometers to get to the field where those plants were. And, the funny thing is that I got sort of the shot that I wanted. Before the masses descended. But that isn't the shot that ended up being, my favorite shot of the day, the one that, that you talked about, that a lot of people have, very kindly complimented me on. It was because I basically sat there for half the day and was just sort of observing what was going on. And somehow this magical moment just kind of popped up. This woman was just sitting there and enjoying what was going on around her. And I think the joy on her face was really what drew me to that shot, because it was like in this sea of madness, if you will, of people, checking out these plants and things like that. There was this woman one woman who was overjoyed by what she was seeing. And luckily enough, like I was able to capture that in a frame, and she was isolated. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
after that, I was like, hey, I can leave now, right? I mean, but that's how it
Yeah.
is for me with my photography.
Hmm.
Sometimes like I'll spend a long, long time just to get one shot. And yeah,
That patience of yours. Yeah, it's incredible.
thank you.
I wanted to go back to your career before photography.
Mm.
You were a venture capitalist for a long time before leaving it behind to pursue travel and photography full time. Um, Tell me about that, and then also what made you take the leap of faith.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. I mean, you kind of have to go back a little bit, because a lot of people are surprised to hear that in university I was an English literature major. Yeah, see,
I'm
you
surprised. You
just
see
made a
my
great
face?
face. So I mean, I it goes back to what we were talking about before in terms of the freedom to choose, and maybe, arguably too much freedom sometimes. But I was set to be pre-commerce. I was set to go into commerce and pursue a career in marketing, because that's what was interesting to me. I'm a very, very fond of media, as you probably can tell, and things like that. So growing up, very much influenced by what I saw on TV and what I read in magazines and things like that. Not necessarily the programming, but just the way that, well, yes, the programming too, but the way that things are delivered in various mediums to people. I mean, a couple months ago, I found an old, one of those old photo albums where you peel the sticky paper
Hmm.
away. But this photo album had, clippings from old Nike ads with sneakers, but it also had ads with like Claudia Schiffer during the Guess campaigns
Yes.
with Ellen von Unwerth, and also Cindy Crawford. And there were, clips of architecture from different magazines. And so I was looking through this album and I was like, oh, wow, this is like a scrapbook of inspirations for me. And I didn't even know it at the time, right? It was just things that I thought were cool.
Mm.
So, that kind of thing really, I just have so many mixed influences, right? And so by the time I got to university, I was like, all this financial accounting stuff that not really interested in. I don't feel like I need to do this. Let's pursue something I love. And so that was English literature. And so I ended up graduating with a, you know, degree in English literature, but I also had taken a lot of courses in comp sci.
Huh.
And so, once I graduated from university, it was really interesting, because what kind of job does a person get with an English major, but also like a computer literate background? And it just so happened that this job fell into my lap, where, a friend of mine was working for a venture firm and he was leaving, and he was like, hey, I know a friend who has a very particular set of skills that might be interesting. And that's how it started. And I ended up working there for 11 years, or close to 11 years. Started as an analyst. And, because it was a small boutique firm, I had a really great opportunity eventually to have a lot of input on investments, figuring out where to put millions of dollars. Developed, a great rapport with the guys who ran that firm. And to their credit, like, they gave me so much freedom to participate at all levels, of the
Mm.
process in that business. So I learned a lot, and I don't even think I knew it until I left, right? And so what happened was the economic downturn in 2008. Things were not doing so great in financial, and there wasn't a lot of new money to invest and things like that. And because my job was so focused on new investments and doing due diligence on companies, and figuring out what technology was next and where to place new money, it kind of got to the point where I was like, maybe I'll do more of my side, hobby, which is photography. Um, and I did. And it got to the point where I was sort of doing so much of it that I was like, maybe I should think about trying this as a career. And again, those guys were very supportive, and they were like, yeah, Maurice, if this is your calling, like, we'll support you. You can hang around and still be a consultant or provide hours as we need them. But go for it. And so what used to be 80-20 in favor of venture flipped, and it was sort of 80-20 for photography. And from there, I basically, became a photographer full time, within a few short years. Landed a really big gig shooting the Royals
Yes, I remember
when
that.
they came to visit, and that was like sort of my first, really big media gig.
Hmm.
Opened a lot of doors for me, and then to make a super long story short, that was when social media was really taking off. Um, Partially because of my, I guess, my technology background and my venture background and just my general interests. Um, I was a big evangelist for what was going on in terms of social media. Quickly recognized that there was a need for content and photos, and started pitching that. Met with rejection for a couple of years, and then the world changed. Right, people started realizing what you needed photos and content for, and then that's when we
Stay and
launched Stay and
Wander.
Wander.
Yes, with your co-founder Alex Strohl, who
Yes,
is a prolific photographer in his own right.
very much so.
Yeah,
Far more than me.
yeah, and so this was in 2013, right? And this is sort of also when Instagram was really starting
To take
to
off.
take
Yes.
off. Hmm.
Fun story. So Alex and I actually met at an Insta meet, or a live meeting of people on Instagram, and that Insta meet at the time was facilitated and organized by Rashad Darawala, who is actually now a current partner in Stay and Wander. So a lot of things in my life with regards to what I'm doing with the company have come about very organically.
Hmm.
Alex, super talented photography, right? I mean, I'm going to say world famous because he is, right? I
He
mean,
is.
um, we just met at a time when he was starting out his career. His energy was what made Stay and Water happen, alongside, I guess, my experience and what little wisdom I had, picked up by that point. But it was, truly the combining of our forces that made that happen.
Hmm.
Without him, there would be no Stay and Water. Without me, there would be no Stay and Water. So it was a perfect partnership when we launched the company. And yeah, fast forward, now many years. I mean, recently did a website redesign, and Rashad and I were looking at, I guess how far we've come. And, I mean, we had to take a step back. It's like, wow, we've done a lot of work over these years. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, I mean, it's just interesting how things start and progress, and how much I owe to, media and the rise of social media. But, we don't present ourselves as a social media company, because we're not, right? We are still about the work, the photography, and the films that we
Hmm.
create,
The
and
content
yes,
creation.
yeah,
Yeah. And you've worked with a lot of brands, from the automotive industry, from Lexus to Mercedes Benz and Audi, lots of travel, Marriott, Starwood, tourism boards across the globe,
yeah.
food and bev, Nespresso, Red Bull, Coca Cola, and tech, Canon, Google, Apple. What have been some of the biggest challenges and rewards working with these blue chip brands?
Um, that's a big question. I mean, yeah, it's something that well, first of all, that list that you sort of ran through. Like I said, we recently did a website redesign, and you may not know, but we've effectively had no website for the history of our company, which is funny for to some, for a company that specializes in photos and content. It's just something that we haven't had time to work on because we've been sort of so busy doing business. But eventually, when we sat down and did this thing and listed all these really great brands that we've worked with, it was kind of like, wow, is that us? Um, and to reflect back on these projects, I mean, we've worked on some really, really huge campaigns where we've had to do a lot of learning on the fly, especially in the early years. So if somebody comes and, puts, I'm not going to say exactly how much, but a lot of money in front of you, but then they want a lot in return, there's a lot that you sort of need to figure out on the fly. And it was just about, I think, keeping a level head and, being able to answer the call. But you do that once, and then you kind of know how to do it for the next time. And so um, we had to learn a lot fast. And I think we also benefited from the way that things were evolving and elevating in terms of content and in terms of social media, and just changing and shifting in the industry. And due to that, we've been able to contribute to how that's changed. We've had companies come to us and say, hey, we saw that you guys did this thing several years ago. Um, that inspired us to launch these types of campaigns. And now how can you help us sort of take the next step? And so when we hear that kind of thing, it's amazing. Likewise, on the creator and photographer side, we have a lot of people approach us and say, hey, we remember you guys did this. And, it was basically the inspiration for me to pick up a camera. And when we hear that, it's amazing because we work so closely with creators around the globe. And actually, a big part of my job is networking with those types of people, mentoring them when necessary, and just helping them to find their way in this world that we've found ourselves sort of smack in the middle of in a lot of ways.
What you were talking about, brands coming back to you and saying, you did this and it really inspired us. How can you take us to the next level now? What does next level look like now?
Oh, well, it's pretty interesting because next level now, when we started doing things, social was so, hot. It was the new thing, the shiny new object for most brands. So, even though we presented ourselves as a photography and videography type of studio company working with creators that somehow had built influence in that world, brands typically would focus on the latter. So they were like, oh, can you make us, a lot of cool images? Can you make things that look like what, you guys are making and, include our brand in it and then tell the world about it? And so that was fantastic for a long time. But, from a very, very early point, we were the ones that were saying to brands, well, yes, we can do that for you, but you should think about building out your own channels. You should think about having proper content plans, for your own company, working on your own brand image and thinking long-term about the type of content that, is going to represent your brand on all these different channels that you have. Fell on deaf ears, right? For the vast majority of brands for years. And so how that's changed is, I always like to tell a story. I was invited to speak as a keynote at AdAsia several years ago. I think it was 2018. And as part of my thing, which as part of my talk that got a lot of accolades from ad agencies, in private messages and emails afterwards, I was talking about how, social is so hot right now, but you need to start planning, internally for your own content strategies because social isn't going to be the shiny thing forever. It's going to be one of many things that you need to do. It's not like you totally abandon, TV and radio and ads on billboards or, subways and things like that. It's all going to be part of a strategy. And so, I was encouraging agencies and brands not to silo themselves too much and put, all their money and all their time into one basket. And so it's kind of come, full circle by now and started doing so probably within the last 2 years, I would say, where brands have kind of woken up and sort of decided, hey, influencers, we pay them a lot, but, they might promote something for us one week and then the next week they're promoting something else. Or they might, do a ton of different ads that have no real relationship to each other. And it's just like everyone's out for a paycheck. And so, maybe we need to make sure that our own channels and our own content strategy is on point. And, that's the kind of thing that we've been offering for a couple of years now. And so, to answer, I guess, your question more directly, it's like now they're like, hey, how can you help us put together a campaign that puts the focus on us first? And influencers or ads or things like that all sort of feed that machine and help us look good as a brand. But we want to be the ones that own that conversation with the people that are, visiting our social channels, following them, or in some cases obsessed with them, right? How can we do that? And so we've sort of, our mindset has been there for a while. It's like, how can we help brands even in a white label way, create what's going to give them a voice, give them, an image, develop a story, a reputation, allow them to interface very organically with the people that are, visiting and engaging with their different channels.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where we're at. And so it's not, I would say it's almost like social media. It's not even 2.0. It's like 3.0 for what we see now, right? It's the strategies are very different. It doesn't really matter if you have somebody shout you out on their Instagram post. You need to do more. You need to be there yourself and be active, right, in
Yeah.
terms of the content.
And cohesive across all of these different platforms that are coming out. I know you and I have been chatting about Clubhouse and the rise of that, and I know that you were really, really loving it. Why do you think it's setting itself apart from other social media platforms right now?
I think Clubhouse is really interesting because it has sort of the hallmarks of some other social platforms, but the element of voice and live interaction adds this component of real connection, which is very fascinating to me. I mean, make no mistake, I think that Clubhouse could be gone, within the next 6 months. There's a lot of different factors that go into this, but I'm willing to devote my time to it for now because I've had some pretty special experiences on there, and different examples of very real connections, which are much more difficult on things on other platforms like Twitter or even Instagram, right? I mean, for those that don't know what Clubhouse is, it's basically a live audio chat platform where you can do everything from start a spontaneous room just to speak about an idea that you have, or you can put out something that's like a radio show and it's live, right? But I think the thing is that I see a lot of people either love it or bash it, and I'm kind of in between.
Mm.
And I would say that I love the idea of it. A lot of people bash it because they're not able to quickly find things that they find interesting on that platform. The people that love it have somehow, by luck or by design, based on who they're following, fallen into this thing where they see a lot of relevant content. I'm in between because I keep telling people 70% or 60 or 70% of what I see is straight garbage on that platform. Maybe 25% of that is pretty interesting, which is a pretty low number, but 5% of that is really special. And so for me, that's enough for me to explore it as a platform and to engage with it and see, what it has to offer in a sort of longer term experiment. I think the final thing is that, I've seen that because of the pandemic, so many people are on that platform seeking knowledge and seeking guidance. And I think that there are also a lot of people who build themselves up to be gurus on that platform who are giving, either just straight up not good advice or advice that comes from not being very well informed, from a very narrow set of experience. And so even when I'm tired and even when I don't want to, sometimes I'll jump into some of these rooms to try and give my perspective and to help people, I guess, in terms of some of the questions that they have, but always drawing from my own actual experiences, whether it's personal or stay and wander. I almost feel like it's my duty sometimes. And so it's rewarding when people are thankful, but that's not for me what it's about. I just see so many people that may have decided to make a career change, over the past year. And obviously it's not been the best time to do that. And they're really lost and struggling. And just to go back to what I was saying at the top of this, segment about Clubhouse and voice, unlike reading, tweets or seeing people post on Reddit asking for help, on a platform like this, you really get a sense because of voice about the way people are feeling, right? Whether it's hurt or disappointment or loss, or on the flip side, joy or interest or curiosity, like you hear those things all come through voice. And so that to me makes it a very engaging platform that's worth exploring, at least for now. And
yeah. I agree. I mean, there are other forums where you can hear voice, like, on Instagram, like someone might be recording something. But I think there is something that is totally right about hearing the emotion in someone's voice. It lends it that humanity. And what's great is that it's not one-sided. Here, someone else can engage back with you. It's not just a video of you talking and out there.
Right.
It's like you can actually have this conversation, and you can have this conversation with someone who's in a completely different country too. And I think it's really it fosters a different kind of connection, maybe, is
100%.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that's really what it is for me. I mean, like I said, I have no illusions. I think there are a lot of problems with the platform. I think that there's a lot of decisions that, the people that started that app need to make, on a daily and weekly basis to make things better. And they're kind of running out of time because there are so many competitors coming. And when that happens, there's going to be a lot of sort of dilution of interest and attention.
I heard about Spotify acquiring something
Yeah.
today in order to compete. So
Yeah. I mean,
it's coming.
I think the last time I checked, there was like over 20 competitors on the way. And
Wow.
so, I mean, again, like I said, I haven't, set upon, the idea of Clubhouse as a long-term, solution or service, but I'm happy to devote some time to it, to explore it, because it's interesting right now.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I've spent some time on there as well. And I agree, there's a lot to wade through, and it can feel overwhelming and not relevant to you, even though you've indicated what you're interested in. But at the same time, yes, I've participated in some discussions on there, which has been really nice and great. And I have learned a lot too in some of the bigger rooms, which has been pretty incredible. So it'll be exciting to see what comes out of this concept, whether it is Clubhouse or something else that will take it and evolve it into a better refined platform. But I feel like I interrupted you. You're going to say something.
I was just going to say, what comes first often isn't what's left standing. And so, excuse me. So it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out. But, whether it's here or somewhere else, I mean, I think voice is here to stay now that people have had a taste of it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Agreed. And I wanted to go back to, I know that you're talking about being a mentor to creators. And you are always imparting wisdom to everyone, and I appreciate that. You'll always call me and say, "Hey, I think you should look at this," or "Have you thought of this? I've got an idea." So thank you for looking out. But what kind of advice, or maybe a universal truth, would you impart on any creator right now? I was going to say the next generation of creators, but it can be any creator, people from our generation or the next generation. What kind of advice would you impart on them as they're continuing to create and evolve and, trying to stay relevant?
That's a very, very big question. I think, a lot of it I've always said is to create from your heart. Because I mean, these are things that are quite easy to see through. And I say that because, through the years, especially for me running this agency, I mean, we get so many people that reach out and say, "Hey, this is what I want to do. I want to, take advantage of social media and make money." Or I want to, you guys are inspiring because you're able to turn, what you're doing into a business. But it's, a lot of people don't really consider all of the reasons why that has come to be, right? And so there are people that are very, very fixed on the creative, but don't think about the business. And there are people that, maybe are really good at the business or really good at marketing and selling, but then, the work doesn't stack up. So I think, what I encourage is for people to figure out what's missing from, their arsenal or from their skill set and shore things up, right? And that is about sometimes doing, what you do best and asking for help or mentorship to, fill in the gaps. Sometimes that's about developing your own personal skills. But that's really what it is. It's kind of, one foot rooted in, lofty, like follow your heart, and always be true to yourself and your creativity. But it's actually, the other half is rooted in being very practical and very real. It's like, hey, there are some things that you need to learn. And, I can tell you that there are things that I had to learn, lots of things, right, to keep this company going and, get it to where it was or where it is now.
From a business structure side?
Yeah, business or anything, just, any void, right? Dealing with other people, right? Negotiation skills. I mean, things you hear talked about a lot, pricing, or like, just how do you retain customers and make them happy, right? How do you communicate properly, not just with your clients, but also your coworkers or, your partners and things like that. There's a lot of things that people don't really consider because they're like, oh, I'm really good at doing this one thing. So, that's going to lead to great success.
Mm,
Fortunately, that's not the case, in most cases. Um, I mean, just to take it all the way back to rewind it to the beginning before Stay and Wander. I mean, part of the reason, which you probably don't know, where this idea for our agency came along was, early days. I had chats with Jeff Hamada, who runs Boom, and I don't even know if he remembers this, but we were talking about how artists, of which Jeff is very knowledgeable about, and because he functions in that world, how artists, typically even the most talented ones, are so terrible at business, and it's to their detriment, right? They don't often get valued for their work properly, or they just don't find the success that maybe they deserve or otherwise could achieve because they've fallen down in that aspect. And so early on we had talked about, yeah, we should become consultants for artists and things like that, because we feel like people need help. And so that, believe it or not, so, after a few left turns and right turns, turned into, excuse me, a big impetus for why Stay and Wander was founded, right? It wasn't 100% just because we wanted to make cool things. That was, half of it. But the other half of it was, we know a lot of really cool people that we love, friends that are so talented and they're doing wonderful things, but they're either, finding themselves up against roadblocks or being taken advantage of, by the people that seek them out for their work. How can we help, right? And so that's really how
mm,
how Stay and Wander started.
mhm.
And so, yeah, I mean, that would be, I guess, my advice would be to pursue your passions, but don't, neglect some of these other things that are essential to making sure that you succeed.
Right. Yeah, do it and be smart about it. Yeah, if you want to be sustainable and
Yeah,
be around.
yeah.
Right.
And I mean, it sounds like generic advice, but
Yeah.
to me, it's not, because of what I do. Right? It's, if you can't find that within yourself or you can't learn it, then find somebody to help you. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, the part where some people fall down.
Right. And you know, realize that people really are helpful. And
Hmm.
so when you ask, so many people are willing to help. And so don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid to do
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't be afraid to admit to people what you don't know. Right? I mean,
Mm, wise words. Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask about this last year for you, and I wanted to ask it more so on the personal front. The pandemic happened, and how did that affect you personally? Mentally, emotionally, and how did you? Yeah, how did you deal with it?
um, this funny thing is, if we had done this chat 6 months ago, my answer would probably be quite different. But, now we are a year into it, and, a lot of things have changed. I mean, right off the bat, almost all the business that we had, scheduled for the rest of spring and summer was canceled or postponed indefinitely. So, from a business standpoint, the first 6 months of the pandemic was a disaster, which is fine, because I mean, it's disappointing, obviously, and income is something that everybody enjoys, but it's like we were prepared. And so as things went, I remember, like, everybody, your friends talk to you, or even acquaintances, what's the first question that people ask? It's like, how are you? Right? And in the pandemic year, how are you became a much more loaded question than it normally would be. And for me, the answer for the longest time was, I mean, now that I look back, it almost sounds like a script, even though it was true. It was like, yeah, I'm doing okay. It seems like the world is on fire, and that's troubling. But I have my health, and the people that I know are healthy. Business is suffering, which is unfortunate for a lot of people, but I think everybody's going to, come back stronger than ever, right? And so I think there was sort of optimism by the time September rolled around. And again, for me, it was still the same, right? I mean, if you asked me, it's kind of the same answer. Like, yeah, everything's great. I'm healthy. It's not as much money coming in. It's way down business wise, but all's good. Like, there's not a lot going on. And hey, it's September, and it looks like things might be getting better. And so, things started to attempt to open up, and I think, as we all know, that kind of came to a crashing halt when people realized, well, wait a minute, it's actually getting much worse. I mean, a lot of people knew because that was the prediction based on, previous pandemics, but it was still, it became very real when it happened. At the same time, it was like, still like, hey, it's fine. I mean, I miss traveling, in a normal year, I'm on the road half the year. Spending a lot more time at home, right? I'm learning how to cook really well and, be at home and be comfortable being at home, blah, 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 right? It's great. And I think that, things really started changing by the end of the year. And this is, so my best friend, since grade 5, his mom got ill and passed away. And then, before Christmas, his dad passed away. And, at that point, first of all, it was unfathomable, just how someone you love can experience that much loss in such a, small amount of time. I mean, his dad was, and I hope he doesn't mind me talking about this, but, it's all out of, love that I share a story like this, right? He was taken off the ventilator just before Christmas, and it was a huge blow. And then it's one of those things where it all just sort of started hitting really close to home, right? And I know that this hasn't happened for the vast majority of people, and that's great. I mean, I think, people are fortunate, and I'm thankful that it hasn't. But, for me, things really changed because, it was like I was very, very worried about my friend. But also, these people were very, very close to me, right? Like I consider them loved ones. They were my second set of parents, right? I mean, as we talked about at the top of this, I grew up in an Asian household. We don't really celebrate holidays and things the same way, right? So every Christmas, every Easter, every big occasion I would be spending at their place and welcomed and offered a seat at the table like I was part of that family. And so yeah, it was a lot. Like it was difficult because um I had to sort of, be there for my friend. Um because I mean he lost his parents, right? And they're my second parents.
Right.
So, I was like, I can't really, express whatever it is that I'm feeling because there's no place for that. And so, bottle it up. And I think, very shortly after that, like probably surrounding New Year's, it kind of hit like everything in terms of like not just the business and not just what was going on, with my friend and his parents, but more and more, as I said before, part of my role is to, um, keep in touch with a worldwide network of photographers and creators, right? On both a professional, but inevitably, friendship level. And, more and more people were struggling. And I think what happened was, it just, for the first time, it started to feel like a lot for me. Right. And so, for me, I just kind of shut down for, 2 or 3 weeks surrounding New Year's. I mean, I was still like on Zoom calls wishing everyone a happy New Year's and things like that, but I was just in a very different place mentally, and I just needed to like shut down and be away from everything, which is something that I can honestly say I haven't had to do, I think, ever in my life. So really what it tells me is that the amount of underlying stress had built up to a point where it was too much for me even to handle. And I'm not saying that, I broke down or that, I was depressed or miserable or anything. It was just different, right? It was like I had to pause pause a lot of different things that, I was doing. I was, in a funk right? I wasn't trying to like drum a business. I wasn't trying to create things. I was just, I mean, it sounds dumb to say, but I was just sitting there, watching TV for, 8 or 10 hours a day. And that's not something that, is typical for me, but I just didn't have the capacity to do much else for a little while there. And I feel like that was my way of like regrouping internally and dealing with that kind of underlying stress. And I think since then, I've become much more aware. And, we talked about my powers of observation. And I think that was a blind spot for me. But now I see it in others, that underlying stress, no matter what their answer is when you ask the question, how are you?
Mm.
And yeah, it's getting to the point where I think I just need to be more aware and be able to like respond or comfort people that are kind of feeling the same way, right?
Hmm.
So
Well, I just want to say I'm so sorry for your loss. That is a big loss to you too.
yeah, thank you.
And I'm always here.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying is true. That when we ask how people are, we have to watch how they really are.
Yeah,
Observe their energy, their eyes, their body language. It will tell you a lot.
but it's so hard right now, right?
Hmm.
Because so much of it is, you know, through socials or DMs. So you know what?
Hmm.
I'm that annoying guy who calls people.
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we do have to keep on checking in on each other for sure. Yeah. And do you feel now that, are you feeling better?
I am feeling better. So it's interesting. I mean, through it all, I've always felt optimistic, right?
Mm.
Even, like I said, when I felt like I just needed to shut down, it's not like I lost hope, right, about anything. It was just, it was just mourning and recognizing that, that things are not great, right, for a lot of people, and now they're not great for people that I love very much.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just about digesting that, right? But I've always felt optimistic that there's an end to this. I know that there are so many things going on in the world. I mean, where do I start, right? That are negatives, that are blights. But I've always been an optimistic person, and now I think more than ever, I think I can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Hmm.
Doesn't mean that there's not going to be more pain and hardship, as we get there, as we move towards, um, things getting back to quote unquote normal. But I will say that I think the new normal is on the horizon, and I think
Hmm.
that there's a lot to be optimistic about. And
Hmm.
so, whether that's on the business front or mental health for the people around me improving, or just mental health for the world at large improving, because that's what's contributing to a lot of what's going on in society right now, right? So I'm hopeful, not just hopeful, but I fully expect things to get better. That's the level of my optimism. It's going to happen, right? So
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things coming to light. And, to your point of, I've had this conversation with several people, that the things that we're seeing happening, the violent things, the things that are so unspeakable come from so much pain.
mm-hmm.
And so hopefully we're all starting to recognize that
Yeah,
and can begin to fix it together
yeah, it's good,
slowly,
slowly,
very, very
and
slowly.
it's going to take work, but I
Hmm.
mean, I think people are more willing to do the work now after having gone through this than they were, a year ago, right? So
Right,
yeah,
right. I agree. Um, I have two more questions for you.
okay.
The first one is what's coming up in terms of new projects that you can share with everyone?
Ooh, I won't get into specifics about projects, but we are gearing up to launch a lot of the things that we had planned to launch over the past year, but effectively, put on a shelf, to either develop more or change or just wait. Because I mean, in terms of the business that I'm in, a lot of budgets were frozen. Not just that, but just people, even the art directors, agency people, and brand people and marketing departments that we talked to had really no visibility in terms of their own directions because of everything that's been going on. So, like I said, I mean, I'm super optimistic about things starting to move towards a new normal, and I'm seeing evidence of that. I mean, my inbox is full these days, and
This
there's
is a good thing.
well, it's a great thing. I mean, there's a lot of projects that a lot of inquiries, a lot of booked projects. Just in the past, I'll say month, like
Mm,
an incredible recovery is on the way because our clients are starting to realize, "Ooh, wait a minute, when people start to venture outside and start to go places, buy things, not the things that you would buy during a pandemic, but other things, when they are out seeking experiences again. I mean, we need to be in front of those people. Oh shoot, we better call like somebody
mm,
like, Stay in Water to help us, or, whoever it is. Right. And
yep.
so being a part of that is fantastic. And can definitely see the signs of recovery there. Um, we're also excited because a lot of people know us as Stay and Wander, but they don't know that we have quietly been curating at Canada. It's Instagram account just at Canada for almost 4 years now. We've just been curating it with content from the community, you know um, trying to showcase what this beautiful country has to offer. um, we are opening that up for content partnerships, and the interest already has been quite overwhelming. We want to be very careful about it because we want to be respectful of the people that have followed us on this journey to this point, and want to make sure that we're bringing content, and experiences, if you will, that are worthy of their time. And
Mm,
so in conjunction with that, we're going to be launching a website called Hearts of Canada, so heartsofcanada.com. And we're going to be sharing a lot of different things, right? Stories about Canadians that are doing special things, ranging from, the extraordinary to the mundane, but still very
mm.
interesting. We're going to be featuring places, experiences. I mean, it's not fully dialed in yet, but, after, like I said, putting it on the shelf for 6 to 8 months, we're ready to dust it off and put a lot of time and energy and money behind it.
Mhm.
So that's what we're going to be doing, launching those things, and a few trial partnerships that we had left to do, but got delayed. Will be coming out soon, and then from there, yeah, sky's the limit. I think that there's a lot of interesting stories to be told through that platform, and at the same time, we'll continue doing what we do with Stay and Wander as well. And, very, very excited for our worldwide network of creators to come back online. I mean, they've been doing little jobs, local to them, but, once they have the ability to move again, I mean, like I said, things will be changed because there will be a lot more interest in terms of their more local geography, but other projects will also start coming back online. And yeah, I think it's going to be a wonderful time, and lots of creative and interesting things will come out of it.
I think so too. And I'm really excited to see all of that creative work come out when it does.
Thank you.
My final
Uh-oh.
question. No, You're very eloquent and thoughtful. Uh,
Thanks.
with what you do, what is it that you want to leave behind in the world?
I mean, I'll be honest, I think in many ways we've already sort of covered it. Um, Part of what I do professionally and also personally, um, is that I just want to make sure that everybody's making, great stuff, right? Contributing um, to the world around them, whether it's for the enjoyment or education or just excitement and experience of others, right? And so, like I was saying, throughout various, parts of this talk, the things that I do, I fly around managing projects or recruiting photographers, but fully a quarter or half of that time when I'm in Taiwan, or when I'm in, wherever it is, New York or any other city, I'm networking with photographers or people that just want to sit down for a coffee and a chat. And where I can, it's like I help them. I just help by imparting any, wisdom that I've been lucky enough to develop or pick up on my
Mm,
journey, and see if it can help them, offer more to the world in terms of what their special talents and gifts are. And I mean, you touched on this earlier, but there are so many people that I consider to be friends, or even sometimes they're not friends, they're just acquaintances, but they're open to chatting with me. And I look at what they're doing, and I have like ideas about, things that they should consider that might make their businesses better, or how they could translate their, special talents and gifts into something that's going to be amazing for the world. And hey, if they make some money because of that, that's great too, right? But I mean, I spend a lot, probably more than I should, but I spend a lot of time talking to people I know about, business and business development, right? About, hey, have you considered doing this? Or like, do you need help with this? And then we'll talk through, and there have been people that I'm close to that have started businesses that are very successful, more successful than anything I've done. And, I mean, I have a role in that, but it's not like, I mean, I'm not looking for recognition. I'm not looking to be, like a partner or anything. It's just come purely from a place of curiosity and, back to my bookish, inquisitive self. It's like, hey, have you considered like doing this? And they might say, well, no. And then I'll be like, well, here's my idea. Like, what do you think? And they'll be like, wow, that's a fantastic idea. I'm going to look into implementing this. And I'm like, great. I look forward to seeing it, because I truly look forward to seeing that idea come to life, for me, because it's not necessarily an idea that I can bring to life, but it's an idea I had that I recognize somebody else can bring to life. And so, there are a number of those in the world already. And if I can just keep contributing in that way when I have time, I'll be very happy when I pass on. And I guess that would be what I've left behind. It's just, knowing that I've been able to help bring some interesting, special, creative, unique ideas to life in the world.
That's so beautiful. And
Thanks.
I just wanted to say this, hearing more of your story, I feel like I learned, we've been friends for so long, and I feel like I've learned so much more about you from this conversation. And, hearing you say what you said right now, you're so much like your father. He's very generous with, what he can do with his hands and helping. And so are you. You give something different. You give your time, and you give your wisdom, and you give your ideas. And, I just wanted to make that observation.
Same but different.
Same but different.
Thank you. No, I mean, that's, yeah, no, I mean, now that you mention it, like, we are so different, but it's just I guess the way that we contribute is different, but the spirit of it is very similar. Same. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Momo, my affectionate nickname for Maurice.
Thank you so much for having me.
I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope we get a part 2 sometime in the future.
Ooh, I don't know if I have anything left to talk about. I need to go back into my shell now. So, yeah.
I'll give you 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I'm kidding.
All right.
Thank you, Momo.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that last conversation, be sure to check out more episodes of The Craft on Spotify and guest photo galleries on the website at wearethecraft.com. Thanks again for listening.